Hello, and welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto, attorney at law in the state of Michigan, where I've been practicing law in over 23 years, specifically in the field of lemon law and consumer protection. I'm also a frequent writer for Jalopnik's subblog, Car Buying, and I frequently contribute to Opposite Lock as well. I've also written a book called The Lemon Law Bible and a few others on cars and Michigan history. You can look those up on Amazon or any place that fine books are sold. Today I'm going to talk about the 5 most common phone calls I get at my office. I have an internet website where I have my email address, my contact information, and my phone listed, and my phone rings all day long, and I answer it. In fact, yesterday I talked to a guy, and he said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you answer your own phone." And I said, "Well, you know something, I'm just cutting out the middleman. I used to have a secretary who'd answer my phone and say, 'Hey, Steve, someone wants to talk to you.' And I realized that there was no need to have that happen. I would just answer it myself. So if you call and you get my voicemail, it's not because I'm not here or not answering the phone. I'm probably talking to somebody else. So I talk to people on the phone all day long, and a lot of the phone calls I get, I can't necessarily represent everyone who calls me, but I can often dispense advice. And so these are the 5 most common phone calls I get on a daily basis in my office. And I'll give you the short answers to the questions that people ask me. I've spoken about a lot of these topics in broader form in other podcasts, Lehto's Law, or other videos. And I've also written about it extensively on Jalopnik to some degree on all of these topics as well. But these are the 5 most common calls I get. So every single day, without question, I've already gotten one today, and it's only 11 o'clock in the morning. I get a phone call every single day from somebody who says, "I bought a used car and it's defective. What can I do?" And it depends on if you bought it from a dealer or an individual, but 9 times out of 10 anyways, there's nothing you can do, because most used cars in America are sold as is. Now, some states don't allow a vehicle to be sold as is, but most states do. And in a state where a vehicle is sold as is, it literally means you're buying it with all faults, no warranties. So if you bought it from a dealer and you bought it with a buyer's guide, look at it and see if it says you bought it as is. If you bought the vehicle as is, there's almost never anything you can do unless they committed active fraud to get you to buy the car, or unless there's something else wrong with it, like the odometer's been spun back, or they sold you a vehicle with a salvage title, but they washed the title and didn't disclose that to you. It takes an extremely egregious form of fraud to get around that. But generally speaking, if you bought the vehicle as is from a dealer, there's not going to be much you can do. If you bought the vehicle from an individual in most states, and especially in Michigan, it's presumed that you bought the vehicle as is. People who sell you the car off Craigslist, or you're driving along the street and you see a car with a for sale sign in the window, it's just an individual selling you a car. It's presumed to be as is. They don't need to tell you that it's as is. And the number one complaint I hear from people is they say, "Well, the guy told me the car ran great. The person made these promises to me about what a great car it was. They said that they had, driven it themselves. They'd done lots of work on it. The car was a wonderful car." And it doesn't matter if a dealer's telling you this or if an individual's telling you this. These things are not actionable, okay? It's considered sales puffery, sales talk. They're allowed to say those things. Everyone knows that I'm going to sell you a car and say, "Yeah, it runs great." I'm never going to sell you a car and say, "By the way, it's a piece of junk and I'm scared to drive it," okay? So the law actually allows sellers to make those kinds of statements, to sell you a vehicle as is. And I often tell people the worst part about buying a vehicle from a used car dealer in America is you read the purchase agreement, and the purchase agreement often contains language that says you cannot rely upon the statements of the seller or the salesman. So they have you sign that, and in most states, if you sign it, you're presumed to have read it and understood it and agreed to it. So if you signed a purchase agreement that says, "I understand I'm buying this car with all faults, as is, and I'm not relying on the statements of the salesman," you're stuck with that car. And I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I've talked about as is till I'm blue in the face. I might be blue in the face right now. I'm not sure. But the point is that as is something that if you're going to buy a car as is, the key is that you buy it budgeting for it. That is, that you are knowing that you're buying a car with all faults. It might have problems. So it doesn't help me, of course, to be able to tell you after the fact that you shouldn't have bought the car as is. But perhaps if you watch this or listen to this, now you'll be thinking about it in the future, and someone goes to sell you a car as is, you've got a budget for what could go wrong with that car. So the number one phone call I get is used cars. What can I do? The answer is usually not a whole lot. I'm sorry to tell you. The number 2 phone call I get at my office, and this is a good one, is people say, "I bought a brand new car. It's defective. I think it might be a lemon. What can I do?" See, that's the good news, because that's what I do, lemon law. If you bought a brand new car and you have it in you have the vehicle in the shop 4 times in the first 2 years of ownership, first time in the first year, or 30 days in the first year, and it's got a substantial defect that cannot be repaired, the car's a lemon. contact a lawyer like myself. There's lawyers like us all around the country that do these cases. We can get the manufacturers to pay our attorney fees on your behalf, so it won't cost you anything to hire us. And I tell you, send me your documents, fax them to me, email them to me, bring them to the office, whatever. I can look at your documents very, very quickly and see if you've got a case. If you've got a brand new car and it's not quite there yet, what you do is you save all your repair orders and you dog them. You go after the dealership constantly. Whenever there's something wrong with your car, you bring the vehicle in and say, I demand that you fix it, write it up, and give me the repair order. The repair orders are what make or break your case. The documentation is key. So hang on to your documents. So when you're going to call my office and say, I've got a defective car, it's brand new, it's got these problems, I'm going to say, I need to see your paperwork. So that's what you do. So the quick answer to that is yes, there's help for you if you bought the car brand new. That's the key, buying a car brand new. The number 3 phone call I get at my office is people who've bought boats, RVs, ATVs, motorcycles, and other things that aren't covered by lemon laws. Personal watercraft. A lot of these things get you around from point A to point B, but they're not considered motor vehicles under state law. Some states do have lemon laws that cover broader topics like motorcycles or RVs, and I know that there's been a push in some states for boat lemon laws. In fact, in Michigan and Florida, there are so many boats out there that you think there ought to be a lemon law for them. And I've actually been consulted on articles written by people who are trying to get laws passed for boat lemon laws. And as of right now, they're not covered by the Michigan lemon law, but there are laws that cover these things. But the key is going to be whether you bought it new or used and if you bought it from a dealership or not. The bad news is that so many of these vehicles or these things are sold, and they're sold as is by dealerships. So I get someone who calls me and say, I just bought a used boat from a dealership. I just bought a used RV from a dealership, a used ATV, whatever it is. They say, what can I do? And I say, well, did you buy it as is or did it come with a warranty? If you bought it as is, see above. It's the same thing as buying a car. You're buying it with all faults. If you're shopping for a boat or an RV or anything like that and it's used, if you're going to buy it as is, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you go in with your eyes open. The key is to get the item inspected. So if you buy an RV or a boat or something like this, bring somebody who knows what they're doing and have them look at the thing. This is extremely important because of the fact that most people don't know how to inspect a boat properly. I've spoken to so many people who say, I wanted to buy a boat, but I couldn't afford a brand new one. So I went out and I bought a used boat. Next thing I know, it's taking on water. There's dampness inside it where there shouldn't be dampness. And I say, well, did you hire a marine surveyor? And then I can hear the blank look in their eyes over the phone because they didn't hire a marine surveyor. The key to getting a boat looked at is to hire somebody who knows boats and have them inspect it properly. So they're going to look for things like water inside the hull where there shouldn't be water. They're going to check things like the steering gear. They're going to check things like the engine, which might not be the same as checking the engine in a car. So get those things inspected. But if you buy a brand new boat, RV or motorcycle or something that's not covered by lemon law, there's help for you. There's a thing called the federal lemon law. In fact, I've done a YouTube video on this as well as a podcast on this. The Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act is called the federal lemon law. It covers any item sold in America to a consumer with a warranty. This is going to cover your boats, your RVs, and all these things that are not covered under most state lemon laws. And interestingly enough, if you bought a brand new car and it's covered by the lemon law, it'll also be covered by the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act. Sometimes we like to stack these claims on top of each other because it helps us in court in case we lose one claim or another on a technicality. But the key is that there are laws that protect you if you bought a boat, an RV, ATV, motorcycle, personal watercraft, whatever it may be, okay? But it's got to be brand new with a warranty from the factory. If you bought it used, it's going to be the same thing as when you bought a car used. If you bought it from an individual, you are almost entirely out of luck unless you can prove the individual committed active fraud. I've had somebody tell me before that they bought a boat from a guy. The guy said, yeah, it's a great boat. I use it all the time. There's nothing wrong with it. They take the boat out and the boat starts taking on water and starts to sink. And they tell me, they say, Steve, is there any way on earth that this guy didn't know the boat was a safety risk and was going to likely sink the second I put it in the water? And I say, well, logically it would seem that that's the case, right? But the problem is you're going to go to court and get a jury or a judge to buy the fact that the person had to have known this. And you're not going to just say, well, it does this now, it must have done it then. You're going to need to have some kind of evidence or proof, and that's where the marine surveyor would have been nice. If the marine surveyor looked at it and said, hey, it's got problems, he probably would have talked you out of buying it. But if a marine surveyor looks at it after you bought it and says, hey, this problem is bad, and it's been here for X number of days, weeks, months, or years, and you can put that back to the last time they used it, maybe, but it's so difficult to do that. So the key is to avoid getting yourself in that situation in the first place, buying a boat used or an RV used, ATV, whatever it might be. However, like I said, that is the third most common phone call I get in my office is I've bought a boat, RV, ATV, or whatnot, not covered by the lemon law. What can I do? So if it's used, like I said, same as buying a car. If it's brand new, the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act will help you and possibly get you out of that. The fourth most common phone call I get in my office, and there's an interesting debate about this because I've heard from people around the country who say, I've never heard of this before. Yet I have heard from people in other states who have heard of it, and I know that many people in Michigan believe that you always get 3 days to cancel a contract, and you don't. And I got this phone call yesterday being a Monday. I had somebody call me yesterday, and they said, hey, Steve, I bought a car on Friday. Can I still return it? And I said, what makes you think you can return a car you bought? And they said, well, it's 3 days, right? You got Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm just not sure how to count Monday. And I said, well, where do you get the 3-day right of return from? And they said, well, it's the law, isn't it? No, it's not the law. There are some rare circumstances where you do have the right to cancel a contract for any reason. One's the Home Solicitation Sales Act. If someone comes to your front door, knocks on your door, and sells you something, like the Fuller Brush Man or a vacuum cleaner salesman, you have a certain amount of time to cancel that sale for any reason. It's called a cooling off period. Likewise, if you've ever bought a home with a mortgage, you'll go through all these documents and all these disclosures. Sometimes in there, you'll see that there's a cooling off period. You can change your mind on some of these documents. But it's extremely limited. But it's not the case that if you walk out and buy something, you just automatically have the right to return it. That's not the case. And a lot of people assume that, and I don't know why they think that. But I've actually had people tell me that they were told that by a salesman. A salesman actually said, hey, you know something, if you don't like it, you can return it because that's the law. And I say, well, did you get that in writing? They said, no, I don't need to get it in writing. It's the law. And I said, well, read the document where it says nothing the salesman says to me is enforceable. If he had written, you have 3 days to return this, yes, you would have 3 days to return it. But if you didn't write that, you don't have that right because the law does not exist. So there's no automatic right to return something within 3 days. If someone tells you that, ask them where the law exists. Ask them to show it to you. I've pointed this out before, that laws don't just exist out there in the atmosphere or the ether. Laws are written down in law books. You can look them up on the internet now. If you want to know what Michigan law is, you look up Michigan law, MCL, and then you put the number in or you ask for a search at the Michigan legislature site, and you can find laws. You can find where these laws exist. There is no such 3-day right to return law. It's a myth. It's a myth. It does not exist. And then the number 5 phone call I get at my office all the time, I've written about this as well, is about bad car repairs. People tell me, they say, I brought my car into a shop and they did something wrong. They overcharged me. They charged me for repairs that weren't necessary. They fixed my car, gave it back to me, but it's not fixed, and all manner of things that can go wrong with an auto repair. And Michigan is a great state for this. Strangely enough, a lot of the laws in Michigan are not that good. Michigan's Consumer Protection Act, for instance, was gutted by our Supreme Court, has no use at all almost anymore. On the other hand, we've got a great law called the Motor Vehicle Service and Repair Act. Every state in America should adopt this law, but a lot of states don't. And what happens in Michigan is if you bring your vehicle into a shop to have repairs done, the shop's got to be licensed. The employees of the shop have got to be licensed. If they work on your car, they've got to be certified mechanics, certified by the state. And before they work on your car, they've got to give you a written estimate in advance of the work they're going to do, what it's going to cost. And they got to show it to you, sign it, and then give you a copy. Okay? So when you walk out of the repair shop and they're going to do a transmission overhaul or an engine rebuild or a differential change, whatever they're going to do, they might even check your torque ratios. Whatever they do to your car, they have to put it in writing and tell you what it's going to cost. And it says right on the state mandated forms that if they exceed that estimate by more than 10%, they've got to call you and get your permission to exceed the estimate. And if you are in a state that doesn't require this, you should still ask for it. So when you go into a shop, let's suppose you're in another state that doesn't have such a requirement. You walk into a shop, they go, we want to rebuild your engine. You need to rebuild your engine. Say, what's it going to cost me? They should be able to give you a number. I've heard of so many people who say, no, I went into a shop and the guy just said, I'll call you when I'm done. That's like a blank check, And the problem you have is that many states, when they do repairs on your car, it creates a mechanic's lien. They can hang on to your car until you pay them. So imagine a situation where you go in and you agree to an open-ended repair, and then when they call you back and they say, hey, your car's done, you now owe us $9,000, and you say, that's not right. They say, well, guess what? We're going to keep your car unless you pay us $9,000. And if you don't pay us, we're going to auction your car off and recover the money. Okay? In Michigan, they can't do that if they didn't give you the estimate in advance and stick to the estimate. Then when they're done with the work in Michigan, they've got to give you a document that says, here's what we did to your car, here's the parts we put into it, here's the labor we did, and here's the name and signature of the mechanic who is affirming that these repairs were done properly. And the mechanic's got to sign it, and they give you a copy when you pay. So you walk out with a document that's itemized, that says what they did to your vehicle, how much it cost, what the parts cost. And not only that, they've got to let you have the old parts, as long as the parts aren't required for a core exchange. And if they are, they got to show them to you. So let's suppose they put a new starter in your car, okay? You can say, I want to see the old one. You can actually walk back there and have to show you the old one. They can't say we got rid of it. That's illegal. Believe it or not, you can sue them for it. It's also a crime. Now, I've never heard of a mechanic going to jail for breaking the Motor Vehicle Service and Repair Act, but theoretically they could. And that's something to hang over their heads. So, in Michigan, you don't get as many phone calls about blatant ripoffs with car repairs. But I get phone calls from people around the country. Say, I'm in another state. I brought my vehicle in. They said, yeah, there's something wrong with it. They fixed this. They fixed that. Next thing I know, they've fixed 4 different things. The thing still runs bad. And they say, oh, $7,000. I say, well, did they give you a written estimate? They said, what are you talking about, a written estimate? And so my point on this is, if you're in Michigan, be aware of the law. Most shops follow the law pretty clearly. They give people written estimates. They give you a receipt at the end that's itemized. But if you're in a state that doesn't have these laws in place, ask for a written estimate. And if they won't give you one, say, something, I'm going to go someplace that will. Because an upstanding, reputable shop should be able to give you a written estimate before they do the expensive work on your car. So those are the 5 most common phone calls I get with the answers. Number 1 is regarding used cars. Number 2 is brand new cars. Number 3 is the other things not covered by the Lemon Law, boats, RVs, and so on. Number 4 is the 3-day return rule that doesn't exist. And number 5 is car repairs. So those are the phone calls I get every single day. And I think those are a good slice of life as to what happens to consumers in America. And as you might guess, my answer to all of this is you should educate yourself beforehand. A well-educated consumer can watch his pocketbook and save his money before it gets ripped off. It's much harder to hire an attorney and go chase it down later. So those are the 5 most common phone calls I get at my office. Any questions or comments, feel free to contact me, lehtoslaw.com, LEHTOSLAW.com. I'm on Twitter at Steve Lehto, at STEVELEHTO. You can listen and subscribe to this show on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. And of course, you can watch it on YouTube, which I thank you for doing. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.